Dalton Kincaid, 2.1 points. Mark Andrews, 3.5. Drake London, 3.5. Marvin Harrison, 1.4 points. Raheem Mostert, 4 points. Chris Olave, 3. For all of these stars that struggled in week one, there's just as many gems still out there on the waiver wire. Let's talk about it. Let's start off here with my top five, and of course, I'll give you 10 total players on today's show. Starting with Isaiah Likely, you guys knew this was coming. Of course, 9 receptions, 111 yards on 12 targets, and that is the most impressive thing from week number one. He was one shoe size away from getting 2 touchdowns, which would have gave him like 34 fantasy points on the week. Now, by far and away, the number one scoring tight end on the week. It looks like Mark Andrews still needs some time to ramp up, so likely he's going to get a lot of the work until then. So for this first month of the year, I love this guy's upside on a weekly basis, and it seems like Lamar trusts him. Justice Hill, his teammate, is a top 5 guy as well. Only rostered in 4% of leagues on the Yahoo and ESPN. But last week in week one, I don't know if it was the Chiefs' stifling pass defense or just heavy pass rush, but Justice Hill got a lot of the pass work out of the backfield. He was the check down guy for Lamar Jackson. It wasn't Mark Andrews or, for the most part, Zay Flowers. It was Justice Hill. Of course, 6 receptions on 8 targets, giving you just about 11.5 fantasy points, finishing as a running back too. So to only be owned in 4% of leagues, this is the guy that needs to be on your roster, especially, we don't want to wish injuries, but if Henry goes down or if this offense gets down early in the game, they're going to need to throw, and Justice Hill is going to be the running back that's on the field the majority of those snaps. At the receiver position, let's talk about the waiver wire king, right? Every single year, it seems like this is a guy that is a must pick up on a weekly basis, and then he sucks, and then you drop him, and then it's just this continuous cycle with Rashid Shaheed. Now, he is owned in more than 50% of Yahoo leagues, so I will say Yahoo, he's probably not there. But ESPN, 42%, good chance he's still on your waivers. Now, Derek Carr in this offense. Now, they played the Panthers, probably the worst team in the league again, but that offense looked elite. 47 points, if I'm not mistaken, absolutely insane. Now, Rashid Shaheed, just as we've always known him, is a big, deep threat. He's going to get a lot of these big plays. And as we saw, 3 receptions, 73 yards, and a touchdown. But what I liked about Shaheed's week one is that he was not solely used as a big threat player. He was still getting intermediate catches, right? He was still getting used in the slot a fair amount throughout the game. And again, 5 targets is better than nothing. So again, for a guy that gave you what, 10 and a half, just about 17 fantasy points for week number one, Shaheed is an amazing player and an amazing pickup option, if I could talk correctly. Another receiver is Wan'Dale Robinson. Again, he's owned in a lot less of leagues, so a lot more likely he's out there. He was primarily the slot receiver in this offense. Now, slot receivers get the most attention because they're the closest to the quarterback in any offense. Now, Wan'Dale's such a special talent. Last week, he had 6 receptions, 44 yards, and get this, 12 targets. Now, again, that goes to show that Daniel Jones is not a great quarterback because 6 of these targets were over his head or just underthrown. But Wan'Dale Robinson, whether if it's Tommy DeVito or Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll is scheming him up to get the football on a weekly basis, as we saw last year when he came back from an injury. Wan'Dale, I think, is in an offense that's going to be down a lot. They're going to need to throw just as much as they're down. And Wan'Dale could have a big, surprising wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 level season when it's all said and done, especially because Malik Nabers is only going to get more attention throughout the season. How about some kickers, though? They're people too, right? Chris Boswell only owned in about 5% of leagues. This offense is good, right? Okay, even, but they're far from great. So this is a team that's good enough in a Mike Tomlin offense to get over the 50, right, across midfield, but that's pretty much it. They stalled out 6 different times in week number 1, and every single point the Steelers scored was from Chris Boswell's leg. Again, 22 fantasy points, the number 1 kicker on the week. He's a great long-range kicker, as we saw in his entire career, but mainly these last couple of years and in week number 1. So again, if this offense is going to continue to just be good, not great, get to the 40 or the 30 of the opposing team's side of the field, Chris Boswell is going to have a big season. He's probably going to end up as a top 5 kicker at this rate. So again, whether if it's Wilson or Justin Fields, this offense just doesn't have the I guess explosiveness to put up that many points on a weekly basis. So Boswell is in for a big season. I don't know how we didn't see that before the year, by the way. Some other guys here, some guys that I think are great additions to your team. They're just not in the top five. Baker Mayfield looked great. This offense did not miss Dave Canales like a lot of us were expecting them to. He had 37 and a half fantasy points. That is the number one quarterback on the week. Baker Mayfield, ladies and gentlemen, 300 plus total yards, 4 touchdowns. This offense was on fire. Now, I understand the Commanders' defense looked atrocious, but how much of that was the Commanders or how much of that was the Tampa Bay offense? It's definitely a combination of the two. Now, I will say in week 2, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a relatively tough matchup. But for example, if you drafted a guy like Jordan Love, and he's going to be out weeks 3 and 4, or up until probably mid-season, grab a guy like Baker Mayfield. I think he has a good matchup in week 3 against Denver and week 4 against Philly. Both of those games are at home against subpar defenses and secondaries. So he might be a sneaky option to start here a couple weeks down the line. His teammate, Bucky Irving, of course, rookie running back out of Oregon, for those that didn't know, and he got volume. He plays just like a mini Rachaad White. 9 attempts on the ground for 62 yards, 2 receptions in the air for 14 yards. Again, the numbers don't blow you away, but the volume is there. Great stash piece here, second half of the year. Take Bigsby. The Doug Peterson wasn't lying. It is really a 50-50 workload as they had the same amount of carries as far as Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. And Tank Bigsby showed this explosiveness that he had at Auburn that he didn't show in his rookie season last year. So Tank Bigsby looks like he is here to stay in this offense. And this offense, I think, could be fun for fantasy players unless you own Evan Ingram. Alec Pierce, a crazy week last week. That is the best way to explain it. He had that one deep 60-yard catch in the first drive, I think, for the Indianapolis Colts. And then I thought, okay, that's it, right? We're going to talk about him for 2 seconds, and then that's it. But then it continued. He had 3 big plays in this game for the Indianapolis Colts. Of course, he went for 125 yards and a touchdown on the week. 22 fantasy points. He's going to end up as a top 10 guy on the week, maybe even top 5. But again, it was his best career game. And if Adonai Mitchell and Michael Pittman are going to get all this attention, Alec Pierce might be the guy to sneak out and have a pretty good season. And then another kicker. Excuse the quality of the image. I could not find another image of higher quality for Blake Group or Group A, however you want to say it. But the offense looked great. Like I talked about earlier. He's another kicker that had 22 fantasy points, and he's also a great long-range kicker. So this offense, when they run into better defenses, they're just an offense that's good, not great, and I can see this team kicking a lot of field goals here in 2024. So quick recap here on your screen. Of course, I had my top 5, and of course, a 6 through 10. Here are your guys to pick up on the waivers and for week number 2. So if you enjoyed today's video, drop a like, consider subscribing to the channel. Plenty more content on the way.